It was Christmas Eve, and the base was unusually quiet. Snowflakes fell softly, covering the ground in a blanket of white, as if the world itself had slowed down to observe the moment. Among the soldiers, one young woman stared at the small window of the barracks, longing for home. She had a simple wish: to see her family, to share laughter, and to feel the warmth of Christmas. But in the military, wishes aren't always granted. She asked her commanding officer for permission to go home, expecting perhaps a polite refusal. What she did next, however, was completely unexpected. Her decision would not only alter her own life, but also create a ripple of inspiration across the base. What unfolded that night was a story of courage, heart, and the true meaning of Christmas in the unlikeliest of places. The snow fell silently over the military base that Christmas Eve, creating a blanket of white that seemed to soften the harsh edges of the world around it. Inside the barracks, the usual sounds of soldiers moving about, boots on metal floors, the distant hum of generators, were muted, as though the entire base was holding its breath in anticipation of the holiday. Yet, for one young soldier, the quiet only made her heart ache more. Her name was Private Emily Sanders, a dedicated and disciplined soldier who had spent years serving in distant lands, away from family, away from comfort, and away from the small joys of life she once took for granted. Tonight, though, her longing was impossible to ignore. She wanted nothing more than to go home for Christmas, to be with her family, to laugh, to hug her parents, and perhaps, for just one evening, feel the warmth of a normal life again. But asking for leave during the holidays was no small matter. She knew the rules. She knew the chain of command. And she knew that the military didn't bend easily for personal wishes, no matter how heartfelt. Still, the ache in her chest would not let her remain silent. She rehearsed her words as she approached the commanding officer's office, feeling the icy wind sting her cheeks through the small gap in her uniform. "Sir, I would like to request leave for Christmas," she muttered under her breath, as if speaking aloud might somehow make the world collapse. Her boots crunched on the snow-covered pathway, each step echoing with a mix of fear and hope. Inside, the barracks were alive with soldiers preparing their own versions of a holiday, some quiet, some whispering to one another about family far away. Emily's colleagues looked up as she passed, noticing her determined yet anxious expression. For weeks, she had kept her wish to herself, but now, the longing had spilled over into action. She reached the office and paused at the door, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The commanding officer, Colonel Matthews, was known for his strict adherence to rules and his no-nonsense demeanor. He looked up from his paperwork, eyebrows raised, as if he could sense what was coming before she even spoke. Emily stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Sir, I was hoping to request leave for Christmas. Just for a few days to be with my family," she said, her voice soft but firm. The colonel leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. There was a long pause, the kind that stretches time and fills it with uncertainty. Emily felt a knot in her stomach tighten. She knew that asking wasn't a guarantee. Every soldier had dreams of being home for the holidays, yet most of them quietly accepted that duty came first. But she had to try. She had to ask. "Emily," the colonel finally said, his voice calm but deliberate, "I understand your request, and I understand why you want to go home. But you must remember, this is not a regular time off. We are still active. We have duties, protocols, and responsibilities that cannot be postponed. I cannot simply grant leave because it is Christmas." Her heart sank. The words were not harsh, but the disappointment hit her like the icy wind outside. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I understand, sir," she whispered. Yet even as she stepped back, something inside her refused to let go. She knew that Christmas was more than a day. It was a feeling, a moment of hope, and even if she couldn't go home, she wanted to find a way to make it meaningful. As she walked back through the barracks, she glanced at the small windows dusted with frost and thought of her family sitting around the fireplace at home. She imagined the aroma of baked cookies, the laughter, and the warmth. A spark of determination flickered inside her. If she couldn't be home, Maybe she could bring a piece of home to the base, to herself, to her fellow soldiers, to everyone who longed for the comfort of family. And in that moment, a plan began to take shape, one that would test her creativity, her courage, and her ability to inspire. The words of Colonel Matthews echoed in Emily's mind long after she had stepped out of his office. "I cannot simply grant leave because it is Christmas." The sentence was not cruel, yet it carried the weight of finality, a reminder that her personal wishes often came second to duty. She walked slowly through the barracks, boots crunching on the packed snow outside, feeling the cold seep through her gloves. Each step reminded her of the gap between her and the family she longed to see. Her heart ached, not just for herself, but for every soldier in the barracks who shared the same quiet longing. Inside, the barracks smelled faintly of disinfectant and worn blankets, a sterile yet familiar scent that contrasted sharply with the warmth of home she remembered. Soldiers moved about in small clusters, some whispering to each other, others lost in thought. She passed by a group playing cards, their laughter muted but genuine. She smiled faintly, realizing that, like her, they were finding small pockets of normalcy amidst a world built on discipline, rules, and constant vigilance. Yet, the weight of disappointment was heavier for her tonight. This was not just another Christmas away from home. This was the Christmas she had hoped would be different, a Christmas she had dared to dream about. As she returned to her quarters, Emily reflected on the colonel's words. She understood them logically. Rules were rules, and the base couldn't operate on sentiment. Yet, emotionally, it felt like a wall had been placed between her and the warmth of her family. She thought of her mother's smile, her father's quiet pride, the way her little brother's eyes would light up when she entered the room. Those moments felt so distant now, almost like they belonged to another life. Sitting on her bunk, Emily stared at the small, framed photograph of her family she had brought with her. It was worn at the edges, slightly faded, but it carried every memory she held dear. The photograph reminded her why she had joined the military in the first place. Service, duty, protecting others. Yet at this moment, it also reminded her of what she missed, what she longed for. She realized that the ache she felt was universal. Every soldier stationed far from home carried it quietly, tucked into the corners of their heart, behind the disciplined faces and steady hands. But Emily's mind refused to settle into despair. She had always been someone who faced challenges head-on, who found solutions where others saw only barriers. If the military couldn't grant her leave, perhaps she could bring the spirit of Christmas to the base instead. The idea sparked a sense of determination within her. She would create something meaningful, a celebration, a moment of joy, a memory that would carry everyone through the cold, dark night of separation from their loved ones. The denial, though painful, became a turning point. It reminded her that true resilience was not about giving up when doors closed. It was about finding new paths, about adapting and overcoming. Emily's thoughts turned to small details. Lights, decorations, a modest meal, music, perhaps even a handwritten note for each soldier. These were simple gestures, but in the sterile, disciplined environment of the barracks, they could mean everything. Her fellow soldiers began to notice a subtle change in her demeanor. The sadness in her eyes was replaced with quiet resolve, a determination that spoke louder than words. She began sharing ideas quietly, asking a few trusted friends to help gather materials, decorate, and prepare for something special. The act of planning, of taking initiative, filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. The denial from the colonel, though disappointing, had sparked a fire that could transform the barracks into a place of warmth, even in the heart of winter. By the time she lay down that night, snow falling softly against the window, Emily no longer felt defeated. The disappointment of being denied leave had shifted into a quiet motivation. She knew the next steps would not be easy. It would take creativity, courage, and determination to bring her vision to life. But she also knew that sometimes the greatest miracles are born not from what we are given, but from what we create ourselves, even in the face of adversity. The morning after the colonel's denial, Emily awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The snow outside had thickened overnight, covering the base in a pristine layer of white that seemed almost magical. Instead of feeling the usual ache of missing home, she felt a flicker of excitement. She had made a decision. If she could not go home for Christmas, she would bring a piece of home to the soldiers on the base. Her plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. She wanted to create a small celebration that could lift the spirits of everyone around her. Her first step was to gather allies. Emily knew she could not pull this off alone. She approached two of her closest friends in the barracks, Privates Ramirez and Johnson, both of whom shared her longing for a moment of normalcy. Carefully, she outlined her idea: small decorations, simple lights, perhaps a modest Christmas meal, and music if they could manage it. The initial reaction was cautious optimism. They had all learned through experience that grand ideas often clashed with the strict rules of the base. But Emily's determination was contagious. By the time the morning briefing ended, both friends were fully committed to the plan. Next came the challenge of resources. The base was not designed for festive gatherings, and most supplies were strictly accounted for. Emily, however, refused to see obstacles as insurmountable. She scoured storage rooms for discarded decorations from past events, found a box of old string lights tucked away behind crates, and even located some tinsel that had been forgotten in a corner. Each small discovery brought a sense of triumph, as if the universe was quietly supporting her mission. Over the course of the day, Emily began to coordinate her secret mission. She instructed Ramirez and Johnson to recruit a few more soldiers quietly, forming a small team that could operate without drawing too much attention from higher-ups. Each member had a task: decorating the common room, arranging chairs and tables, preparing a small snack station, and even creating a makeshift music system. The teamwork transformed what initially seemed impossible into a manageable, structured effort. Every detail mattered. The lights had to be hung just right, the tinsel draped with care, and the small tree they had managed to salvage from storage needed to stand proudly in the center. As evening approached, the barracks began to buzz with quiet excitement. Emily moved among her small team, offering encouragement, adjusting details, and sharing words of reassurance. She was meticulous, yet her energy was infectious. For the first time in weeks, the cold barracks felt warm, not from heat, but from purpose and camaraderie. Soldiers who had been distant and withdrawn started to contribute, adding small personal touches to the decorations: a homemade ornament, a string of lights, even small handwritten notes wishing their comrades well. Emily watched all of this unfold and felt a deep sense of pride. This was no longer just her plan. It had become a collective effort, a shared mission to create joy in the face of disappointment. The most challenging part of her plan, however, was the timing. They had to work quickly, efficiently, and without drawing attention. Emily knew that even a minor disruption could jeopardize the entire surprise. She scheduled the final preparations for the late hours of the night, when most soldiers would be resting or busy with other duties. Her team moved like a well-oiled machine, decorating quietly, arranging snacks, and setting up the music system. Emily oversaw every detail, from the placement of each chair to the positioning of the tree, so that it would catch the eye as soon as anyone entered the room. By the time the night fully set in, the barracks had transformed. What had once been a cold, sterile environment was now imbued with warmth and light. Snowflakes continued to fall gently outside, their quiet presence amplifying the sense of magic inside. Emily stepped back to survey the room, a soft smile on her face. This was only the beginning, but already she could feel the energy shift. The denial from the colonel had been a setback, yes, but it had also sparked a plan that might just create a Christmas to remember for every soldier present. As Emily and her small team worked late into the night, the barracks had transformed from a cold, lifeless building into a warm and inviting space. The lights twinkled softly on the small Christmas tree in the center of the room. Tinsel shimmered along the walls, and the faint scent of cookies and hot cocoa began to fill the air. For a moment, everything felt perfect, as if they had brought a little piece of home to the snow-covered base. Yet, Emily knew that in the military, perfection was fragile. One small disruption could unravel hours of careful planning. The first sign of trouble came unexpectedly. A sudden announcement over the base intercom instructed all soldiers to report to their stations immediately for a last-minute inspection. Panic rippled through Emily's team. This was something they hadn't anticipated. Any officer inspecting the barracks now could easily notice the decorations and consider it unauthorized, potentially punishing the very soldiers Emily was trying to bring joy to. Heart-pounding, she quickly signaled her team to stay calm and think fast. Every second mattered. Emily's mind raced. She knew she had to adapt, to turn a potential disaster into an opportunity. She instructed Ramirez and Johnson to hide the snacks temporarily while she diverted attention by engaging in casual conversation with a few passing soldiers, keeping them occupied as the rest of the team scrambled. Even in the face of tension, Emily's leadership shone through. She remained calm, organized, and determined, embodying the very qualities that had made her stand out as a soldier. Then came the second twist. The commanding officer himself, Colonel Matthews, appeared unexpectedly in the hallway, checking on the barracks. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She froze for a moment, hoping that he wouldn't notice the decorations through the frosted windows. But the colonel's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the lights twinkling faintly, and he stopped. For a tense moment, everything seemed frozen, the silence stretching longer than any second should. To Emily's surprise, the colonel didn't immediately reprimand her. Instead, he walked closer, observing the decorations, the small tree, and the careful arrangement of lights and snacks. Emily felt a mixture of fear and hope. Would he see the effort as disobedience, or would he recognize the heart behind it? She knew that this moment could define not just her Christmas, but potentially the mood of the entire base. Then something unexpected happened. Rather than anger, the colonel's face softened. He raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Private Sanders," he said, his voice measured, "I see you've taken the initiative." Emily held her breath, unsure how he would continue. "This is unusual, but I can see the intention behind it. You wanted to bring a little holiday spirit to your fellow soldiers. I cannot condone breaking protocol lightly, but I also cannot ignore the morale boost this provides." Relief washed over Emily, but the tension remained. There was still the matter of timing. They had minutes before the next inspection and the rest of the soldiers returning from duties. Emily quickly instructed her team to finalize preparations, this time with the colonel observing silently from a corner. His presence added a new layer of suspense. Every detail now mattered even more, and every move had to be executed flawlessly. As the first few soldiers began returning to the barracks, they stopped in their tracks, eyes widening in surprise at the unexpected transformation. Gasps of delight filled the room as soldiers noticed the lights, decorations, and small tokens of festivity. Emily watched quietly from the side, heart swelling with pride. The initial panic had shifted into anticipation, the twist of the colonel's sudden appearance adding a thrill to the night's preparations. What had started as a simple plan now carried an electrifying sense of suspense, and Emily knew that the true magic of this Christmas was only just beginning. As the first soldiers returned to the barracks, the quiet night was suddenly filled with gasps and laughter. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they took in the transformation. The once sterile, cold room had become a warm, inviting space, aglow with the soft twinkle of Christmas lights. The small tree in the center, adorned with salvaged ornaments and tinsel, seemed almost magical, standing proudly as a symbol of hope and togetherness. Tables were arranged neatly, holding modest treats of cookies, cocoa, and other simple delights that had been painstakingly prepared by Emily and her team. The atmosphere was electric with astonishment, joy, and relief, a stark contrast to the silence that usually dominated the barracks at this hour. Emily stood quietly to the side, observing her comrades' reactions. Soldiers who had been exhausted from weeks of duty paused in their tracks, smiles spreading across their faces. Some approached the small tree, touching the decorations and commenting on the effort put into each detail. There was a sense of awe in the air, the kind that comes from witnessing something unexpected, something that reminds you of home, of family, and of the warmth of human connection. Emily's heart swelled as she watched her plan come to life in ways she could not have imagined. Even more remarkable was the reaction of Colonel Matthews. He stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed but a faint smile playing on his lips. Emily had feared his presence might ruin the surprise, but instead, he had become an unlikely participant in the magic she had created. Seeing the morale of his soldiers lifted, he seemed to understand the deeper significance of her efforts. In that moment, the rigid lines of authority softened, replaced by mutual respect and appreciation for a thoughtful act of kindness. As more soldiers trickled in, the room filled with chatter, laughter, and heartfelt greetings. Emily's colleagues began sharing stories, recalling past Christmases and the families they missed. The decorations and treats had sparked more than just visual delight. They had ignited memories, emotions, and connections among the soldiers. Small gestures, like the notes placed by the tree and the personalized treats, became conversation starters, drawing soldiers together in ways the barracks rarely allowed. Emily noticed that even those who were usually reserved or distant were now smiling, joining in, and expressing gratitude for what had been created. Emily's plan had exceeded her expectations, not because of the decorations or treats themselves, but because of the ripple effect they had caused. Soldiers who had been feeling isolated or homesick found comfort in the collective celebration. The barracks, for one night, felt less like a place of duty and more like a home, a sanctuary where hope and camaraderie could thrive despite the distance from loved ones. By the time the small celebration reached its peak, Emily realized that this was the true gift, the intangible warmth that comes from shared experiences and acts of kindness. The initial disappointment of being denied leave had been transformed into an opportunity for creativity, leadership, and compassion. She saw smiles, heard laughter, and felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was a Christmas that none of them would forget, a night where the spirit of giving and the strength of community had triumphed over distance and adversity. As she looked around, Emily allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her earlier had given way to pride and joy. In a world governed by rules, protocols, and the cold rigor of military life, she had found a way to create something deeply human. A reminder that even in the toughest circumstances, one person's initiative could inspire hope and connection. For Emily, the night was not just about decorations or treats. It was about proving that heart, determination, and kindness could illuminate even the coldest, darkest corners of life. And as snow continued to fall gently outside, the barracks glowed from within, a testament to what could be accomplished when courage, creativity, and care came together in the most unexpected of places. The night after Emily's surprise, the barracks felt different. It wasn't just the lingering warmth of the decorations or the faint scent of cookies in the air. It was the change in the soldiers themselves. They moved with lighter steps, spoke with softer tones, and carried a renewed sense of camaraderie that had been absent before. What Emily had created in a few hours was more than a festive display. It was a profound reminder that even small acts of thoughtfulness could transform an entire community. The next morning, as the sun reflected off the snow-covered base, Emily observed her fellow soldiers in a new light. Those who had been distant and withdrawn were now laughing and sharing stories of their families, recounting memories that had seemed buried under weeks of duty and discipline. Even the newest recruits, who had felt isolated and overwhelmed by military life, joined in conversations, their faces bright with curiosity and delight. It became clear to Emily that her efforts had sparked more than holiday cheer. They had fostered connection, empathy, and understanding among soldiers who often felt alone despite living in close quarters. Colonel Matthews, too, showed subtle but unmistakable signs of being moved. Throughout the day, he walked past the barracks, observing the soldiers' reactions and quietly noting their uplifted spirits. Though his expression remained composed, Emily caught the rare glint of admiration in his eyes. In the past, he had emphasized protocol and discipline above all else, but now he seemed to recognize the value of morale, creativity, and the human spirit. Emily realized that her small initiative had not only impacted her fellow soldiers, but had subtly shifted the perspective of the commanding officer himself. Soldiers began approaching Emily individually, expressing their gratitude. Some offered simple words of thanks. Others shared heartfelt stories of past Christmases and how isolated they had felt during deployments. One older soldier, Sergeant Harris, approached quietly, shaking his head in disbelief. "Emily, I've seen many things in my years here," he said, voice low but filled with emotion. "But what you did last night, it reminded me why we do this, why we endure. You brought a little piece of home to all of us." Emily felt a lump in her throat as she nodded, realizing that this acknowledgement meant more than any formal recognition could. Even the quietest soldiers, those who rarely spoke, sought out moments to engage, smiling shyly and offering small tokens of appreciation. It became evident that Emily's initiative had created a ripple effect. What started as a personal desire to celebrate Christmas despite being away from home had blossomed into a shared experience, uniting individuals across rank, background, and personality. The barracks, once a place defined by rules and routine, had transformed into a temporary haven of warmth, laughter, and connection. That night, Emily took a quiet moment to herself, looking out the frost-covered window at the softly falling snow. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the initial disappointment of being denied leave to the planning, preparation, and unexpected twists of the evening. She realized that while she had set out to create a small celebration, the true impact was far greater. Her efforts had reminded everyone, including herself, that courage, initiative, and empathy could shine even in the most rigid and disciplined environments. In that moment, Emily understood a vital truth. Leadership wasn't just about giving orders or following rules. It was about inspiring others, fostering connection, and finding opportunities to create joy even in challenging circumstances. Her small act of creativity and kindness had touched lives in ways she could never have predicted, leaving a lasting impression that would resonate long after the decorations were taken down and the snow had melted. The days following the Christmas surprise were filled with a quiet transformation across the base. Soldiers moved through their routines with a renewed sense of purpose, their interactions now tinged with warmth and camaraderie. Emily, reflecting on the past week, realized that what she had thought of as a simple act of decoration and cheer had become something far greater. It had reminded everyone, herself included, that even within the rigid structure of military life, small acts of thoughtfulness could create profound impact. In her private moments, Emily considered the journey she had undertaken. The initial denial of leave had felt like an insurmountable obstacle, a reminder that her personal desires were secondary to duty. Yet, rather than surrendering to disappointment, she had used it as fuel for creativity and leadership. This reflection highlighted an essential lesson. Challenges, even when discouraging, often carry hidden opportunities. The base's strict rules had not prevented joy. They had, in a sense, prompted her to find innovative ways to create it. Her leadership, though informal, had made a lasting impression. Emily realized that true leadership was not confined to authority or rank. It was about vision, initiative, and the ability to inspire others. By involving her peers in the preparation and execution of the Christmas surprise, she had nurtured teamwork, collaboration, and mutual trust. Soldiers who had been hesitant or withdrawn discovered new confidence and a sense of agency. The experience reinforced a universal truth. Leadership that fosters empathy and empowerment leaves an impact far beyond immediate results. Another insight emerged from the reactions of her fellow soldiers. The joy, gratitude, and shared laughter underscored the power of human connection. Simple gestures, stringing up lights, baking a few cookies, or writing small notes, had bridged gaps between individuals, transcending rank, personality, and personal challenges. Emily recognized that in both military and civilian life, people often underestimate the effect of small acts of kindness. What she had thought of as minor details became catalysts for unity, morale, and emotional well-being. Even Colonel Matthews, the commanding officer, offered subtle acknowledgement of the lesson he had witnessed. He had always valued discipline and order, but through Emily's initiative, he experienced firsthand how personal initiative could elevate morale and bring people together. This served as a powerful reminder that rules and structure, while essential, must be balanced with compassion and understanding. Leadership, in its truest form, incorporates both discipline and humanity. Reflecting further, Emily understood a deeper, almost spiritual lesson. The essence of Christmas, she realized, was not merely about family gatherings or festive decorations. It was about bringing hope, joy, and connection to those around us, especially in challenging circumstances. By creating a small celebration within the barracks, she had captured the true spirit of the holiday. The idea that meaningful moments are often born from effort, empathy, and courage, rather than circumstance. Finally, Emily acknowledged the personal growth she had achieved through the experience. She had faced uncertainty, adapted under pressure, and led a collective effort that brought lasting impact. These lessons extended beyond the barracks and beyond the holiday season. They were life lessons: resilience in the face of disappointment, creativity in problem-solving, and the enduring value of compassion. She realized that while rules and duty would always be part of her life, so too could creativity, kindness, and human connection coexist within those boundaries. As she prepared for the next days of routine and duty, Emily carried with her a quiet confidence. She had learned that even in a structured, disciplined environment, one person could make a meaningful difference. That realization, born from a snowy night, a few decorations, and a brave decision, would stay with her forever, guiding her actions and inspiring her to continue seeking ways to bring light and hope wherever she went. The Christmas celebration at the base had ended, but its impact lingered long after the lights were taken down and the last crumbs of cookies were cleared away. Emily Sanders sat quietly in the corner of the barracks, watching her fellow soldiers move through their daily routines with something she hadn't seen in weeks: smiles, camaraderie, and a renewed sense of purpose. The snow outside continued to fall softly, covering the base in a pristine blanket of white, a reminder of the quiet beauty of the season. For Emily, this moment was more than just the conclusion of a successful plan. It was a profound affirmation of the power of initiative, courage, and compassion. As she reflected on the past days, Emily realized how much she had learned from the experience. The initial denial of leave had felt like an insurmountable obstacle, yet it became the catalyst for creativity and leadership. The surprise she orchestrated was more than decorations and treats. It was a message to every soldier that their morale, happiness, and emotional well-being mattered, even within the rigid confines of military life. In bringing a piece of home to the base, Emily had created not only a festive environment, but a moment of hope, connection, and shared humanity. Her commanding officer, Colonel Matthews, approached her quietly, a rare softness in his gaze. "Private Sanders," he said, "what you did was unexpected, but it reminded us all that leadership is more than rules. It's about vision, empathy, and the courage to act. You've left a mark here that will be remembered." Emily nodded, a mixture of pride and humility filling her chest. It was a powerful acknowledgement, not of rank or authority, but of the human impact she had created. The other soldiers, too, had been transformed by the experience. Conversations became warmer, laughter more genuine, and the sense of isolation that often accompanied military service faded, if only for a while. Emily realized that the true success of her plan was not measured by the decorations or the treats, but by the connections it fostered, the joy it sparked, and the reminder that even in challenging circumstances, hope could thrive. The ripple effect of her actions would extend far beyond that single night, influencing the culture of the barracks, the attitudes of her fellow soldiers, and even the perspective of her commanding officers. In thinking about the broader meaning, Emily understood that her experience carried lessons that extended beyond the military. Life often presents obstacles that feel immovable, moments when our desires seem out of reach. Yet, as she had discovered, setbacks can become opportunities, and small acts of creativity and kindness can have extraordinary effects. By taking initiative, thinking outside the box, and inspiring others to join her, Emily had demonstrated that one person could create meaningful change, no matter how restricted or challenging the environment. As the evening drew near and the barracks grew quiet once more, Emily allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of her family, far away, and imagined sharing the story of this Christmas with them someday. The pride and fulfillment she felt came not from recognition or accolades, but from a knowledge that she had touched lives, lifted spirits, and reminded everyone present of the human capacity for hope and connection. Her story was a testament to courage in the face of disappointment, initiative in the face of obstacles, and the enduring power of kindness. For every soldier who had felt alone, for every officer who had witnessed the transformation of morale, and for Emily herself, that Christmas became a symbol, a reminder that even in the most disciplined, rigid environments, the human spirit could shine brightly. As snow continued to fall softly outside, Emily smiled, knowing that the true magic of the holiday had been created not by circumstance, but by choice. And in that choice, she had discovered the most enduring gift of all, the ability to make a difference, to inspire others, and to create warmth, hope, and joy in even the coldest and most unexpected places.